Sometimes amazing things happen in the NBA that no one could have thought of. The debate about the best team in history always involves the Chicago of the Jordan era. Of course, someone is closer to the Lakers' Shaquille and Kobe. Somewhere extols the coaching genius of Popovich. But in life, it happens that even the best franchises fall to the bottom. And there are only two ways from there. Either push off to the top or break through it completely. Hello, Pencil Sports. And today, I will try to explore the chronology of the fall of the Chicago Bulls after the departure of Michael Jordan, how television refused to show Bulls matches, and commentators were forbidden to call the team world champion. You will learn about this and much more in this issue. Let's go. In the last season, Majay left the team. What happened next would not have been able to come up with even the most humorous comedians from all the humorous comics in the world. In order to understand the full scale of the fall of the Bulls, we will give very simple but indicative figures. With Michael, the Illinois team won 6 titles, and in his last regular season in Chicago, he won 62 victories with 20 defeats. Over the next 3 seasons, the Bulls won 51 games. Okay, it was almost impossible to develop Michael's legacy. After all, it is more difficult to find a second such player than a needle in a haystack, or the free space between Anthony Davis's eyebrows. But the Bulls were lost altogether. Stage 1. How did this even happen? There were many factors of the Bulls' fall. All of the bad things that could have happened eventually happened. The Chicago Bulls dynasty broke up shortly after Michael Jordan won their 6th championship with the Bulls. If you watched The Last Dance, if not, then it's time to fill in this gap. Phil Jackson has already stated that this was his last season with the Bulls due to his difficult relationship with general manager Jerry Krause. A week after Chicago won in 1998, Jackson resigned. It is clear that it was very difficult to replace the great Phil. In such a situation, it seems logical to take a good temporary worker, or immediately hire a specialist for the future, and give him carte blanche at least for the first time. What does Bulls management do? Krause will take his protege Tim Floyd. The horror of Floyd's subsequent work in Chicago is described by the number 20. It was 20 victories he won in 239 matches at the helm of the Bulls. By the way, this is the worst record of wins among all coaches in the history of the NBA who had 2 or more full seasons in the league. The breakup has been since the lockout of 1998. After Jackson's departure, the team owner and the National Players Association discussed lowering the salary cap. Negotiations ended in June, and the NBA announced its 3rd lockout in history. This lasted until January 1999. In the same month, Jordan called a press conference on January 13 and left the NBA for the 2nd time. Trouble does not come alone, so not only Medji left, yesterday's champions also lost Pippen and Rodman, and Steve Kerr's contract is over, and the future multiple champion trainer is gone. Only Kukoc and Harper remain from the star roster, and those who did not determine either the drawing of the game or the final result. And then came the humiliation. The Bulls broke. After Jordan's departure, Chicago could not make the playoffs for 5 consecutive seasons. In between the 1998-1999 regular season and in the 2003-2004 season, the Bulls only once finished the championship not in the last or penultimate place of the East, and they have never won more than 30 victories. Here are a couple of sad cases for the Bulls. In his last season for Chicago, Jordan was expected to become the best sniper of the championship, scoring 28.7 points per match and bypassing Shaqo coming out on the peak. In the lockout season, Chicago won 13 games in 50 games, which is a sentence in itself. Since we have already mentioned Popovich, let's remember another basketball centenarian. Pat Riley, or even then, was in the Miami structure and coached the Heat. In that same lockout season of 98-99, in a full-time game against Miami, Chicago managed to shoot a valiant 49 points for the entire team. Of course, this was the lowest point of the collapse of the dynasty under Jordan, who scored alone under 30. This was not the case. Descending from heaven to earth is always a difficult task, and when you are forcibly lowered from there, it is even more painful. In the 2nd season after Jordan's departure, Chicago's games didn't even want to be shown on national television. And it's not just about ordinary matches, but also about the recent Bulls versus Jazz. Broadcasters were not eager to broadcast the meeting live. They stated that they could not take the game because it would end by halftime. As expected, by the big break, the Bulls were 15 points behind, and as a result, naturally lost the meeting. The first stage was sorted out. All the bad factors that can happen have converged. The head coach and the main stars have left. A lockout season followed, and the new mentor was as unsuccessful as possible. In general, the team was waiting for a logical restructuring. The degradation of the Bulls in the early years without Jordan turned out to be quite sad. Although champion dynasties tend to fall apart, think of Cleveland Cleveland after 4 finals in a row. Remember Spurs after the retirement of the main stars and the transition of Kawhi. Even the Warriors, after 5 finals in a row, were expected to be omitted. Let them then take their own again. But a quarter of a century has passed since MJ's departure, and the Bulls have never reached the finals, so the failure of the franchise cannot be explained only by the usual crisis of multiple post-championship teams of the dynasty. Stage 2. Rebuilding through the draft and a new setback. Attentive viewers could ask a logical question. If Chicago was constantly draining everything in a row and took up space in the basement of the table, he had good chances in the drafts. Everything is right. You've hit the nail on the head. There are several ways to rebuild a team, or momentary exchanges and mass raids aimed at winning here and now, or a more orthodox good old draft. Gene manager Jerry Krause, no matter how rotten tomatoes and potato peelings were thrown at him, knew how to create the right team, at least with the right environment. Jordan had a ride in the golden year. In 1999, Jerry chose Elton Brand under the first pick. Maybe it's all Jerry's influence, but after the end of his career, Brand himself became a Gene manager in the NBA. The signing looked good, which was confirmed by the statistics of the debutant. The powerful forward became the best player of the team and was recognized as the Rookie of the Year. But this did not lead to numerous victories, as the Bulls finished the season with a score of 1765. Chicago's leadership was impatient. For a couple of seasons at the club, Brand scored a stable 20 per game, but he was traded to the Clippers for Tyson Chandler. At the beginning of the millennium, a good average composition was selected. There were several all-stars in the club at once. The already mentioned Brand, Brad Miller, Tyson Chandler. But all of them have grown to the level of the all-star match no longer in Chicago. They either didn't believe in them or were in a hurry. There were resources to get out of the swamp. Let's remember at least one of the best sixth in NBA history, Jamal Crawford. After all, he started his career at the Bulls just at that time. But in addition to mistakes and strange decisions, Chicago also did not fare well. After the disastrous 2001-2002 season in which only 21 wins were achieved, in the 2002 draft, the Bulls were selected under the second pick. They took Jay Williams, whose career was cut short before it really started, after an accident in the debut season. A double failure, considering that Houston chose Yao Ming as the number 1, who could be the new face of Chicago for years to come. Stage 3. The birth of hope. Let's skip the boring period until 2008. Then Chicago did not shine. Although it managed to return to the playoffs, the team was average in a good sense of the word. It's like in one famous movie about the bottom and Bruges. They weren't shit, but they didn't have enough stars from the sky. However, the first star since Jordan still appeared. More precisely, the first of his subsequent heirs. This is now Ben Gordon admits about thoughts of taking his own life and rushes at passers. But perhaps Ben's psychological problems are connected with Chicago. But for 5 years in the Bulls, from 2004 to 2009, it was Gordon who was one of the best snipers of his time and the leader of the team. The athletic Lil Deng was fighting alongside him. However, the personification of that medieval team was an unremarkable white point guard named Kirk. Chicago stopped losing to everyone, and this was already progress. An important milestone in the potential revival of the great franchise was 2008. Yes, you guessed it. It's about the draft again. Successful this time. When the Bulls chose Jay Williams in 2002 under the second pick, they were just a little short of the first number in the person of Yao Ming. In 2008, the probability that the Bulls will be chosen first is a meager 1.7. And what is the probability that they will also take the player to the required position? And in the future, he will achieve the MP award, and he will also be a native of Chicago. There are no victories without luck, and this time, the Bulls got lucky. In the first season, Derrick Rose takes the Rookie of the Year, but the parallels with Elton Brand disappear immediately. First of all, Chicago goes to the playoffs. Secondly, it gives the same series against the big trio of Boston. Yes, it was just the first round of the East, and the Bulls lost, but damn it, it was legendary. The series ended in 7 games with 5 overtimes in total. Perhaps this is one of the best series in the playoffs in history. In that Boston, the role of Doc Rivers' assistant was played by Tom Thibodeau. In 2010, he heads Chicago and a new era of Bulls begins. There are 2 characteristics that can describe Thibodeau's coaching style. Firstly, it is strict discipline and complete dedication, for which the coach was nicknamed Sergeant. Secondly, one of his favorite players is Jimmy Butler, so everyone should plow in the composition. In his first 2 seasons with Thibodeau, Chicago won the East regular season twice in a row. In 2011, Derrick Rose became the youngest MVP in NBA history. However, it didn't work out in the playoffs. Although who did anything work out in the playoffs? Although who did anything work out in the East playoffs at all then, except for LeBron's team? But there were also well-founded claims to the coaching staff. The leaders spent too much time on the court. With Thibodeau, you should always plow. After all, there's no concept of of garbage time for him. Therefore, the team was noticeably tired by the playoffs, which then led to permanent injuries. After all, the career of Derrick Rose and the entire franchise could have turned out quite differently if not for the numerous injuries. During a certain period of his stay in Chicago, Rose almost did not play due to injury, and as we will see later, due to objective circumstances associated with an extensive medical record, he will never be able to realize his potential. Chicago surfaced from the bottom and began to be perceived as a real threat. At one time, they even had a good lineup, with Rose returning from injury, Butler, the NBA's best defensive player Joakim Noah, and Paul Gasol. But the union did not last long. The LeBron factor in the playoffs has not been canceled. Thibodeau was retired in 2015. It's a shame to fly from the conquered peak of a contender to win in the regular season, after you painfully climbed out of the swamp. But then they buried themselves. Remember the frightening parallels in NBA history. So here's another one for you. After Thibodeau, the team was led by Fred Hoiberg. Rumors of his appearance appeared even before the Sergeant left the Bulls. Hoiberg himself has never coached an NBA team before or since. Unearthed it from the University of Iowa. Does it remind you of anyone? Chicago pulled off exactly the same dubious trick as it happened by appointing Floyd after Phil Jackson. And here's another coincidence for you. This only happens in the movies, but Hoiberg even played with Floyd at the University of Iowa. Stage 4, Our Days and the Big Trio. Now the Bulls management has tried to recreate the big trio that has been popular in recent years. The scale, of course, is not Boston 10th and not Miami, which should have won not one, not 2 or 3 titles. And before the Warriors, it's like before the moon. However, the bet is on Vucevic, Levine, and Rosen. What will come out of this or is already happening? You can watch in real time. Maybe experts and fans were mistaken Jordan's heirs, choosing Gordon Rose and Butler. And this is with Alex Caruso alive. There have been 6 league titles in the history of the Chicago franchise, and they are all inextricably linked to Michael Jordan. After the departure of MJ, the Bulls dynasty not only collapsed in no time, but I could not get together again. There were also objective factors in the form of a lockout, the departure of stars, poor management, strange coaching appointments, and injuries to leaders. There was also bad luck with draft picks and with trips to the playoffs against LeBron's team. Yes, Michael, we really lost everything, because the Bulls haven't been in the finals since Jordan. However, even 25 years after Jordan's departure, we are still talking about Chicago. The reasons for the banality are simple. With MJ, the Bulls have become something more than just a basketball team. Recently, on the street, I met some grandmother in a Chicago Bulls hoodie. I'm sure she doesn't know exactly 2 things about her bow. What is a hoodie? And who are the Bulls? Nevertheless, Chicago has gone beyond the boundaries of sports. It is a recognizable brand all over the world. If Jordan's name has become a household name for basketball, the Chicago Bulls remain one of the most popular franchises in NBA history, even if many did not even catch Michael playing for the Bulls. And so this is where our issue came to an end. I hope you liked it, and you will definitely put your like and subscribe to the channel. Well, Pencil Sports was with you. Good luck.